Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here. And this is the first session of the GW4 Open Research Week. So thanks for helping us kick it off on a high note. Thank you all for coming. Just a few notes. We are going to be recording this session. And also, I wanted to draw your attention to our keynote and our awards event that's happening on Wednesday, which should be really good. We've got Marcus Manufo, one of the sort of titans of open research, speaking for us. So if you have a chance to come along to that, I highly recommend it. Just a quick note about how we're going to do the session. So hopefully we're just going to have like a really nice sort of conversation between our panelists. We'll do that for a little bit, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions as well before we adjourn. But before we do any of that, we're going to have a small overview of the UKRN program, which our panelists took part in, to sort of lay the scene and get an understanding of, what they went through in order to get where we are now. So I'm going to hand this over to Kirsty Merritt from Bristol, who will be giving you that overview.
Obviously, I was doing 17 things at once then. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of stuff now. Hopefully I can see, you might be able to see this.
Yeah, I can see the PowerPoint.
Is it in full mode?
No, now it is.
Is it now?
It's in presenter mode.
I hate trying to share things. Would you be able to share the slides that I did, that I sent to you, please? That would be easiest.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I'll just say, I'll do that thing where you say, and the next slide, please.
Okay. Right, I'm just about to share the screen. Hopefully everyone can see that.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. So yes, I'm Kirsty Merritt. I'm from the University of Bristol's Research Data Service. I'm a research support librarian, and my speciality is research data management. And I was quite involved with the Train the Trainer program. And also I delivered some of the training for the GW4’s Train the Trainer program when we first started it 2 years ago. Next slide, please. So, brief overview, UKRN and GW4. Who are they anyway? Because I know that some of you might not know who they are. Next slide, please. So, UK Reproducibility Network is a national peer-led consortium that tries to keep the UK on the map as a powerhouse in research. And we've got a grassroots community, we've got institutional leads, and we've got local network leads who work collaboratively across the sector to ensure that we're trying to not reinvent the wheel and collaborate to make sure that we're doing open research the way that we should be doing it, but also to get researchers really involved in the process. We're not just looking at the training stuff. We've also got work that's been going on recognition and reward, and open research culture itself, research integrity, all of the things that go towards keeping everyone together and on the same page. And the UK Reproducibility Network has now expanded to other countries as well, except obviously they're not called the UK one then. So that's the bit about that, is that it's just all of us working together in the UK to try and keep us on the map. Next slide, please. GW4, apparently we're called the Great West. It's the Great Western University, so that's Cardiff, Bath, Exeter and Bristol. They work collaboratively to try and ensure that we retain our position. In the UK, we're quite a little powerhouse down in Wales and the Southwest. So it's useful for us to make sure that we're working strategically together to ensure that remains. But also they do some bids on big infrastructural things that need a much larger source of money. So they work together to try and keep us up there with the best. Next slide, please. So the history of the Train the Trainer thing. In May 2022, the UK Reproducibility Network ran an ESRC doctoral training program, Train the Trainer event. This was online in the middle of those dark days of repetitive lockdowns. And it was across the UK, and it was everyone that was working on ESRC bids. and how they were, anyone in the doctoral training program. So lots of people that had specialist content required, especially with it being open access and data sharing. Social sciences generally could be a little lag behind a little bit. So it was important to make sure that you're embedding that kind of training in disciplines. And so without that, there was a day where there was a wrapper. We call it a wrapper. I'll come to that in a minute. And the library were called in as a subject matter expert to deliver the content on open access and research data management. So we delivered like a 1 hour long little kind of lecture on it. And then we were available on hand throughout the day as people worked on their own training materials. So we had a large online central hall, and then there were breakout rooms where people could work individually. And then as a result of the success of that, the library were asked by UKRN to continue the delivery of T3, as we call it, courses for the GW4. Next slide, please. So in March 2023, we ran 5 trainer-trainer workshops at the 4 GW4 locations. There were spaces for 5 people from each institution per course, and I can see that there's a number of people that were on the courses that I delivered. It was a very busy week. Open access, research, data management, and preprints were all run in the same week, and it's a day long when you're delivering that training, so it was quite intensive. And to help us with that, the Bristol Institute for Learning and Teaching helped us by designing a wrapper, which we could then deliver. So the whole point of the wrapper is that you've got all of the pedagogy that's in there, and then you just work on that expert content block. We did recognise at the end of doing the GW4 week that there was a need for that portal or some kind of platform to support those cohorts in a community of practice. And since then, having rolled it out much more widely at UKRN, they are working on this website where we're able to have that community of practice. So people can get together and share the training materials that they worked on, either within their little groups or within their cohort, or more generally, because there's no point us all delivering exactly the same set of slides and developing those on RDM or whatever the subject is. It's much quicker if we can kind of share collaboratively. Next slide, please. So this wrapper and the materials was offered to other reproducibility networks. That's available on UKRN's webpage. Christopher Warren, who is my colleague who's helped deliver some of the training from Bristol, he will now miraculously be populating the chat with, there you go, see, look, it's seamless. So we've got those available on the UKRN's website. We made sure that we applied CC BY licenses to everything because practice what you preach. And effectively, the GW4 Train the Trainer program ended up as a pilot for the open research program for the UK Reproducibility Network. So we've been using that wrapper consistently across the delivery that we've done for UKRN. Next slide, please. So the Open Research Programme is a 5-year programme supported by Research England, UKRN institutional members who are signed up to the ORP, and project partners. We started delivering the training in February 2023. The objective for the Train the Trainer programme is that we will train 180 trainers who are most likely to be embedded within research groups, disciplines, faculties, who are at the coalface of the exact thing that they do with their researchers, so that they can then cascade that across. Because we know that if you can get the buy-in from the researchers, it's much, much better than us just putting the same kind of training on from libraries. So we're trying to diversify the type of training that's offered by getting the people who are involved in doing the work doing the training. There's various courses that were offered. So out of those 180 trainers, so we want to have them trained in 180 instances of the their trainer program, and then they will then go on and cascade that to 2,800. And I did see sneakily that Elle Chilton Knight, who runs the training, the training program, she's part of the team there. She can probably tell us what the figures are. Sorry, Elle, I didn't give you any notice on that. So there's various courses that were offered. You can see on the slide there that it's got 3rd and the 12th of February. The next one down, 4th of March, data sharing from planning to publishing. So that's the ones that we did from Bristol. I think we've delivered it 5 times. We've also added a sensitive data one, which you needed to have taken the first course so that you had all the pedagogy. And I think we've delivered it, or by the end of it, we've probably delivered it to about 90 people. So we've managed to get quite a few instances of training in. But that trainer wrapper is there so that it was been designed so anyone can embed that specialist content, whatever they want to deliver on, in that teaching pedagogy. Next slide, please. So the wrapper, it's a set of workshop delivery slides that cover identifying an audience, choosing the right content for that audience, embedding feedback throughout the course and afterwards, and any assessment of what you might need to change if you run the course again. As I said, it was designed by the Bristol Institute of Learning and Teaching and librarians to support those trainees to design, develop and deliver training within their own institutions. So it's all about embedding the skills. They've already got the knowledge. They just need to tweak it for the context, delivering that at their own institutions so that they've got it embedded in projects and disciplines. And throughout that, we've covered the pedagogy. So it's all about constructive alignment and Bloom's taxonomy. And the point of using these are very, very simple ways of looking at things. There's lots of different ways of doing teaching, but these are ways where you can work out what you want your people to know at the end of your course. So they might come in, it might be something completely new. You might want them to just remember it. But if they already understand it, you might want them to bump up a couple of notches on Bloom's taxonomy so that it allows you to design your course based on what the outcome should be. Next slide, please. And throughout that, we use constructive alignment. So we know what the training outcome should be. So you're designing it. So that's the outcome. And then, so we need to know what they need to know, what activities will support that. So how will they learn? And then how will you check progress to make sure that you can tweak it on the fly if you need to? So all of that is embedded in that wrapper. Next slide, please. And throughout that, they will then have the trainees' prior knowledge. There should be some arrows, but it apparently didn't come across when I copied it. Thank you very much. Trainees' prior knowledge, so you've already understood what that is by identifying your audience, and then you work on a specific content block, and at the end of that, you see what the technical skill is that they need, and then you work on another content block, and then work out what technical skill they need, and so on. And at the end of it, you should have built that narrative and linked those blocks together so that you've got those workshop objectives achieved. Next slide, please. That's the kind of schedule that we had for the day. So this is one that Christopher and Jade and I ran from Bristol, probably just before Christmas. So you have an introduction to the day with a 30-minute topic refresher. And the reason that we do that 30 minutes is that there is an expectation when people come into the course that they already have a certain amount of knowledge. And so you're just really delivering some training so that they can see it as an example of whether it would be useful to them or the types of things that are normally covered in research. In our case, it's research data management. And then you kind of look reflectively on whether that content is going to be useful to you. But it also gives you a little bit of a refresher in case you weren't up to scratch on some of it. And then throughout the day, you identify the trainees, plan your overall workshop, plan the individual content blocks for that, develop the workshop by identifying barriers. And if you know who your audience are, the likelihood is that you're going to have a fairly good understanding of the things that they would say, I can't do this because X. And so you've already got those kinds of snagging points preempted. And then it's just about the kinds of things you would use to be effective when you're training. And then you get a chance in the afternoon to work more on the content blocks and to plan those sessions and deliver them in dummy runs so that if you're not feeling particularly confident about it, you've got your cohort to help you do that. Next slide, please. And so the objectives of all of that, embedding that training, is that you are going to be able to work in those groups to deliver at your institution, specifically at a discipline, specifically in a project, align them with the pedagogic practices relevant to that topic that you're trying to get across, preempt those barriers and help motivate them, and then design a strategy to evaluate it. And so we work very much on making sure that the people who are trained on the trainer course, that's why we call it T3, because it becomes a bit of a mouthful, they are be able to reflexively work on developing their skills as a trainer and to be able to ensure that they're delivering what is required by the people that they're trying to train. So that was the trainer in a nutshell. Does that make sense to everyone? Thumbs up, thumbs down if anyone needs anything else discussed or any questions. And so back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Kirsty. Okay, so what we're going to do now is shift a little bit and we're going to start a conversation with some of our panelists. So if I could just ask our panelists to introduce themselves, what institution they're coming from, maybe like what their sort of area of expertise is, which sessions they attended, and maybe a little bit about their motivation for joining the session. So I'll just call out folks and I'm going to pick on my local panelist here and ask David to start us off.
Sure. Yes, I'm David. I'm I'm based at the University of Bath. I'm a professor of behavioural science, and I was previously I was the local network lead for Bath. I think also when we were actually joining the UK Reproducibility Network. I attended from memory the Open Code, I think it was called the Open Software one. I mean, I think, for me, I've been a sort of open science or open research advocate from the beginning. I think I always make the joke that when I was a PhD student, open access publishing was viewed as trouble ahead by some people, and like that's now just the norm. So I think I've tended always to kind of gravitate towards more transparency wherever possible. And for me personally, my motivation is the fact that it's transparency in research, but it's also just a bigger part of academic integrity. And I mean that in every way, from how open workload models should be through to how open our research should be. So that was probably my main motivation.
Great, thanks. What about you, Katie?
Hello, so I'm Katie Huxley. I'm based at Cardiff University and I'm in the social sciences. So I am in one of the disciplines that is lagging behind, shall we say. So I had an email from one of our librarians saying there's an opportunity to go on these courses about open research and, wouldn't you love to learn more? And I'm a sucker for saying yes. So I signed up to all 5 courses and I had a lovely jaunt around the Southwest over the summer a couple of years ago. And really enjoyed the sessions facilitated by Kirsty and colleagues. It was eye-opening. I think so in terms of my background, I use a lot of administrative data in trusted research environments, which means I don't necessarily get hold of my data. I can't publish it. I can't put it anywhere. Rarely can I get my code out. So I think I was intrigued as to kind of what this was beyond open access, which I was familiar with, and not always getting things done in our 3-month time limit. And so I was like, I need to brush up on my skills. I'll go along and see what it's all about. And I've kind of got the bug a little bit. I mean, I'm still working with administrative data research, so it makes it quite difficult. But the stuff that we've done since, so part of kind of an obligation or an expectation of going on the training was to deliver some training back in your institution. So I ran a couple of little pilot sessions. They weren't particularly, and this is targeted at social scientists as well, so they weren't particularly well signed up to. I had to kind of merge a couple to get enough people kind of on seats to make it worth my time running them. And then since then, it's kind of gone a bit full slog. I've been delivering sessions. We've got a scheme at Cardiff at the moment called the Ignite programme, which is funded by Wellcome. And that is aiming to improve research culture, research integrity across Cardiff. So I've delivered open research sessions for them, which was probably at least 70 people overall over a couple of sessions. I've done dedicated sessions for some of the research centres that are based in our building, and we're trying to run kind of induction training as well. So I think for me, it's more about not necessarily getting people to use the practices that we learn about and talked about in the sessions, but to think about how they can work interdisciplinarily, if I can say that as a word, across disciplines. Because if we're working with psychologists, if we're working with medics, these practices are fairly embedded, and so having little or no understanding of them is not useful in trying to get funding. And so I'm kind of running them as sessions where people can think about their own experiences. I kind of introduce the practices, why they're important, what kind of the levers and the pushes are for kind of doing some of this work, and why it's important, and then kind of getting them to reflect critically on their own practices. So that's kind of where I am. I've also, since doing the courses, made contact with our UKRN local leads, who I didn't know existed prior. No offence to those guys, they do a really good job. But so they're developing some learning materials, so working on in a group with them to do some of that work, and kind of just keeping my ears and eyes open, sitting on a couple of committees, trying to make sure that this stuff is represented at university level as well. So I've definitely gone on an OR journey since joining those courses.
That's great, thanks. Liz, how about you?
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm at the University of Bristol. I'm a research fellow, mainly in qualitative research. I joined the training mainly because I was aware of and had experience of open access publishing data sets and pre-registration, but I was aware that there was a lot else that I could be doing that I wasn't, and I wanted to find out more about it, but also conversations with colleagues. I'm just aware that qualitative research seemed to be lagging behind. So I wanted to find out a bit more about that. So I actually did some courses. It was through the UKRN, but it was with the Centre for Open Science last year, who are based in America. The general sort of overview of open scholarship, and then one specifically on pre-registration and registered reports. And then just recently with Kirsty, I did the sensitive data sharing as well. So I've run some courses last year. They were well signed up to, but then sometimes not always well attended. But I think that just seems to be the way of non-mandatory courses in universities. But we've had some really good responses. And since then, I've been asked to give some more talks, but to specific research groups, which seems to work better because you can sort of tailor it specifically to their needs. Sorry, I've forgotten what else I was supposed to be talking about.
Oh no, just your motivation for getting involved. Did you have anything in particular?
Just better knowledge of what could be done for qualitative research, I think. And I'm working with some people in our research integrity office now to develop more materials on sensitive qualitative data sharing. That should be great.
Great, thanks. All right, Matt.
Yeah, I'm Matt Lloyd-Jones. I am at the University of Exeter. I attended the pre-Prince, pre-reg, and data sharing ones. I think not as much as Katie, but I joined because again into open research, and getting it out there and promoting it, I guess. And it's also like kind of some like official accreditation as a trainer. I've run a few sessions as part of the Exeter Data Hub. So we had like our own little open researchy thing going already. So I kind of just hitchhiked on that. And the trainer stuff sort of prepped me for that quite well. And it means that I have go-to presentations and workshops to give, which is nice, especially if you're called to do a seminar and stuff and you haven't got much time. And then was it about what I'm in the future?
Well, I was going to say, I think you guys have already started anticipating some of my next questions, so maybe we'll just roll right into that, Matt, if that's okay. So some of you have already spoken a little bit about what you have done after the workshops, but I was wondering if anyone would like to speak more about how they sort of brought the program back, what sort of, if there were any challenges, if there were any sort of successes, and if you've gotten any feedback on what you have done already after the workshops. And feel free to just unmic and get in there.
Well, I go for it. I kind of already have said a little bit about what I did, but I think I have found it really difficult. And I do think Liz is right. It's kind of a perennial issue of academics at the moment, just dropping out of stuff and not turning up, which drives me insane. But I think particularly with social science audiences and the kind of qualitative element as well that Liz talked about, I do think it's really difficult to get people to kind of come along and engage. So I think we're talking the UKRN local leads and myself about kind of doing it a little bit in disguise. So not necessarily calling it open research, but developing learning materials or something along those lines around a kind of specific issue that doesn't sound too kind of open researchy, so people aren't terrified by it. And we'll wait and see if that works, because that'll be a kind of our next lot of sessions will be kind of run in that way. So we'll see how it goes. But I do think the people who have come to the sessions have found it really valuable. I've definitely found some people who aren't willing to engage with it, particularly around issues around like sharing code. I think if you're not kind of developing open software and stuff like that, if it's your code for your statistical analysis, people are a little bit more wary. They've spent a lot of time developing those skills and they kind of don't just want to give that knowledge away. So having those kind of discussions has been complicated but interesting, and I think I've really enjoyed kind of hearing different people's perspectives. And also when I run the sessions, I always have kind of a final slide of here's some resources that I found, but what would you add to it, what do you know about? So we're kind of building up a list of resources that people can use as well. I'll be quiet.
Yeah, that kind of speaks to another question I had for everyone as well, which is sort of like, what does the future look like for these programs? And what do you think you might need to make that happen?
I mean, to me, it's sort of like twofold, because there's a sort of standardization of training in the sense that, open research as a thing isn't going to go away. It's the momentum is there. So it's making sure that, particularly for newer researchers, that that's kind of embedded into those existing training systems. And I think that's what Train the Trainer helps nudge, right? Is that there's helping people feed that back. But then there's also just that local activation of like quite a lot of people from Bath were fairly junior researchers or PhD students that attended. But of course, they all talk amongst themselves, and it's quite hard to measure that sometimes. But there's like, well, I'm doing this, why are you not doing it? I think the challenges are sort of to pick up. Well, first of all, I think one of the big challenges, and of course, I would say this as a behavioral scientist, behavior change is really difficult, right? It's annoyingly difficult, particularly for more senior academics. There's no doubt about that, because we're all probably get stuck in our ways. But I think there's really interesting conversations to have there. I still think, and I say this as someone who has never really found a specific disciplinary home anyway, but the inconsistencies between disciplines is still large. I think there's the quant and the qual thing, although actually I think the qual thing is changing rapidly in itself. But I think you can walk into one department and hear a very different view of what openness is, and walk into another one and there'll be plenty of people who'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I think that is an interesting interdisciplinary challenge, because I see that even in grant applications where just what's expected is, or what's been done is very different. I mean, it's interesting conversations, but there has to be some middle ground there at some point, perhaps.
Do you think there's something that the Train the Trainer program could do to address that, David?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it might have already done that to a degree. I mean, I sit in a department at the moment that's not historically been as open in some ways. And I think you've got a kind of wave of scholars who are coming in who are much more versed in this stuff. And also because of interdisciplinarity, many people are now starting to be in departments as academics where that was not their original degree. And that naturally creates that kind of interesting dynamic, and it pushes those conversations. So I think Train the Trainer has absolutely done that. I think it then comes back to that challenge of, but what about larger behaviour changes? And that's where institutions have got a role as well, to sort of look at how this feeds into culture more broadly, which they are doing, right? And I think again, it's softer and it's sometimes harder to evidence, but I think things like UKRN and Train the Trainer have absolutely been successful in pushing those conversations along, even if, as Kate suggested, they can be quite difficult conversations to have.
Yeah, so I'll come in. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, thinking about like a lot of the kickback I've had, I've just come up from David, like senior academics who these practices are quite new to them. They've established careers not using them, and suddenly there's a load of us coming in with our new skills, telling them this is what has to be done. And I think a lot of the difficulty is in that. So like on the one hand, yeah, I think there's this approach of like providing like carrot or stick approaches to open research, and we're quite carrot heavy right now, and that's sort of the right way to be, I think, in terms of here's the opportunity to learn new skills. But then I think at some point there does need to be a bit more of a conversation around how do we credit people for this and like appropriately, because the truth is you can just not do a lot of this stuff at the moment and get away with it. And yeah, and the people delivering the training are doing so voluntarily as well. So I guess maybe ways of crediting the trainers as well. But that's that's a much bigger conversation that isn't yeah, it'll take a long time to yeah change.
I completely agree, Matt. I think the challenge is like crediting people versus also just it becoming normal. And it's like that's just actually what you do. And so as I said, I completely agree. I think it's just that balance where I think psychology kind of is a bit further ahead a lot of the time, not just because it kind of had its replication crisis and UKRN is quite heavy in psychology people, right? But it's also because psychology journals have started writing editorials that say, if you want to publish in this journal, we need to see your data. If you don't want to share your data, you're not publishing in this journal. And then it's like it's even beyond credit. It's just like, well, if you want to be in that game or in that zone, then it's going to become normal. I think, if I'm honest, it's institute funders are kind of making the same arguments. So that is not to diminish the fact that people should be credited for having good practice and doing that, but it's also just a balance of where over time maybe that's a way to help it become normal. But I think for some areas it probably has started to just become, in other areas of the sciences, it's kind of de facto that that's what happens. So yeah, that's just me thinking aloud. I always think that's an interesting one, is how you balance like the credit where credit's due, particularly for people who have pioneered the area or have made big changes, but it's also like what's just going to happen potentially.
Yeah, I think this also gets to kind of, we've been talking about like sustainability, and I was interested if you guys had any thoughts around how one could sustain programs like this, and potentially, as you said, how reward and recognition sort of go into that. So I don't know if anyone has some thoughts on that, or either with your personal experience or just spitballing.
Oh God. Yeah, I guess it these are wider issues in academia a lot of the time, as in um like just losing talent through postdocs, for example, a lot of fixed term postdocs, and there's not really a concerted effort to retain talent through things like permanent positions. And I think what I see at the moment is like the agenda's shifting, and the unions are getting on board with open research, but we're still in this like transition space where we're not sure if it's going to take off, and they're not really investing in that in the way I would like to see, I guess. But yeah.
I think for me, it's so I've started making my presentation slides for my OR courses available on Figshare, so anybody can go and steal them if they want to. And I think it's really interesting with the welcome funding that I mentioned earlier, the fact that funders are kind of investing in research culture within universities gives them a chance to kind of think more strategically about what they're doing. So our team who are running that have pretty much completed now, and they'll start doing evaluations and stuff and see how they're kind of following people for a while. So it's kind of a research project within itself. But they're also talking to Bath. I don't know if you guys, anybody on the call is involved in that, but they're talking to Bath about developing some of those resources so that they're online available, potentially running things collaboratively across universities. And I think that's another way, if we're all struggling to get bums on seats, being more open in who can attend different institutions training as well. Like today, like we're all here from different places. I think that's a nice way to learn about what other people are doing as well. But I think it's trying to plan in that kind of succession or that continuation afterwards, because the majority of us that did the training were all on fixed term contracts. It was going to be tricky going on. You might get a new job and it dies a death. So I think it's thinking early about how you can kind of try and maintain that within your own institution as well.
Yeah, like with the data hub I mentioned. So I guess there was about four of us running that, and then I'm still here. Someone else has gone on to do a fellowship and a bit less time for delivering the training. Another guy, his postdoc ended, who went to work in IT. So yeah, there's a few people still there. But I guess yeah, and all the materials are online. And this is the thing; it can live on. Um, especially if often these people are really good at making things available and reproduce, obviously. So, but then, yeah, I think you still, yeah, sometimes it helps to have a person. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this has led me in, I think, to my next question. Sorry, Katie, did you want to follow up there?
I was just going to add Kelly Snow's on the call as well, who's one of our I don't know your proper title, Kelly, data management people, is on the open research team, open access teams, and she is a great resource for us, but she has limited time to go out and speak to academics as well doing her day job. So I think it's about having that resource to keep it going, I think, and have a dedicated space for it.
Yeah, so that kind of leads into my next question, which Kirsty also mentioned during her short overview, was so as we know, like UKRN is focused on this peer-to-peer cultural change, and that's kind of what we've been talking about a little bit here. Although I think certainly for Bath, we had a lot of postgraduate researchers involved, and that's not exactly peer-to-peer if they're not reaching those senior people, like David was saying. But that being said, you know, when we're thinking about the sustainability of these sort of things and even the delivery of the train the trainer sort of things, I was wondering how research support staff fit into this. I think some of you have spoken a little bit about how you've been interacting with research support staff, but I wondered if you could share some more and where you think we fit in.
We just need more of you.
I was about to say, you're very important.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. This is when this is when I will be convinced that it's really taking off, is when we see more permanent positions specializing in this stuff. And I think that's not all on the unis. That's a lot of that's on funders and, as David said, journals enforcing policies, because often they have policies about open research, but they may not be actively enforced. I think a lot of the time, the way the change happens is senior people have no choice to some extent, but maybe it's not something they end up like specializing in exactly, but they start thinking about hiring people who are good at this stuff. Or yeah, and permanent people.
I think it's one of the things that was, I think, quite evident in the T3 courses was that it was largely junior-ish research staff that attended. We had a couple of PS colleagues who joined, and I believe they're using some of the material and there's kind of presentations online and stuff, but I don't know how active they are now in doing some of this work. I'm not sure. But that might just be their slightly different roles.
Yeah, certainly we at Bath had quite a few of our research support staff attending these as well, because like there's the folks in the library who I think we're overrepresented here, but there's also all sorts of project managers and other research support staff who often are helping to enable the research happening as well. Yeah, sorry, Matt, did you want to?
No, I've just seen the question in the chat. I think, you know, there could be more of a blurring of the line between research support and researchers, because often there's overlapping skills there. I mean, I work on systematic reviews, and we work with information specialists and librarians all the time, and it's so good to just have someone who specializes in a thing, one bit of the project that I can just not have to worry about, for example, and they're highly technically skilled in that area. And yeah.
Yeah, and I can also say at Bath, the way that we've been kind of approaching this is to try and be collaborative between the research services and the researchers. And one of the things we've done is try to take the UKRN sort of branded sessions, and we've put them into our official sort of doc skills training program. And they're sort of branded as UKRN, and and we're going to be working on trying to create our own sort of internal train the trainer sort of program where we are trying to mitigate that loss of our PGRs and sort of have a stable stream of folks, ideally. And I think, not to toot our own horn a little bit, I think the research services staff will be important to that because we tend to stick around longer than the PGRs. So we can provide that through line potentially with that as well. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Okay. I think I have one more question, and then maybe
I did
we'll
have
open
my
it.
hand
Kirsty,
up for
yeah,
that.
sorry.
Yeah, I did have my.
Please go.
I'm like, it was basically I was answering the same question that Matt was, so it is a little add-on to that. I think as a passionate advocate of open research, I think we really do have to stop making that distinction between research support staff and researchers, because we're partners in a professional endeavour. And whilst individual researchers may be experts in their own field, we're experts in ours. And as Al's just said, I've been doing this 10 years. We get the overview of everything. We can see how it all maps together because we're panned out from it. The benefit is that if you have people like us, professional services staff, that are able to see the big picture and where everything fits in, and then collaborate with the researcher who is at the coalface, that's when you can really make the magic happen. Because we'll go say, hang on a minute, that's not that policy there, or we're doing this thing here, or there's that team that you need to speak to there, which you never even knew about, which quite often happens. Or that person that sits next to you in the office is really good at doing this thing because we've delivered bespoke training for their particular project. That's the part where we can make a difference. And it's one of the things that Utrecht University are very, very hot on open research. Like they are right up there at the top of doing things. They've taken away the distinction between faculty staff and professional services. Now they're just staff, because otherwise we're all treated differently. And it's a source of frustration for many of us, but it's only by working together and eradicating that distinction that we'll be able to make a change, in my humble opinion.
I agree. I think also that's where we hopefully in the long term will start to see more research support staff appear as authors on papers, because that in the same way that in some other projects I've been involved with, you've had I would probably describe them as more like knowledge exchange partners, but their input's obviously been fundamental to the work, and that probably is something that needs to be recognised and encouraged wherever possible. Which again leads to more interesting discussions, because there's fields where it's common to only have a couple of authors, where actually now there's going to be a lot more. So again, more of that will nudge that. But yeah.
Great, thanks. I have one more question, and then we'll open it up. Oh, Matt, did you want to comment? Okay. Just one more question, sort of a broad question, and then we'll move it on to the questions from the audience. And we've touched on this a little bit already, but I was wondering if anyone had some reflections on how they think that the UKRN's Train the Trainer program sort of fits into the broader projects of cultural change within sort of the university. And also if maybe you have seen any impact at the local level, or if you want to speculate wildly about what the impact might be at a broader level.
I think I've definitely seen movement at Cardiff. I wouldn't say it's because of the Train the Trainer courses, but I think there's definitely movement at Cardiff, and I chair the Research Staff Association, so I volunteer to whinge about all sorts of procedures and processes and be a bit of an agony aunt. And through that role, I've managed to get on quite a few different committees, and in that role, I am then advocating for open research as well, where that voice wouldn't necessarily be there otherwise. I think there are some people in some groups that would be pushing it, but in others, it's not necessarily kind of a factor. I mean, we talk a lot about research integrity at Cardiff, and open research is part of that, but it's not at the forefront of that in their thinking, I don't think. And I think kind of the Ignite programme that I've mentioned a couple of times, I got in touch with the organisers and said, I'm delivering this separately. If you want me to be involved, I can be. So it wasn't necessarily a reach out to me, it was me kind of going to them. And I think that will continue a little bit. And then the other thing, and just back on Kirsty's point from a minute ago, they've run sessions for we have 3 different types of staff cohort, and they've run different sessions for everyone. And at the beginning, I said I think that's a mistake, and I think that they will revisit that in any future rounds that they have. And it might be that they have a couple of optional modules that people don't have to kind of go along to. But I find it really, really frustrating that we are divided in that way. And it means there's a lot less opportunity for PS staff here to get involved in things, and there's barriers for different activities, which is frustrating. But I think the ref is helpful, weirdly, in this zone at the moment. I think everybody goes, "Oh, the ref, I hate it," and we should performance managed out of our jobs and all this kind of stuff. But I think actually it is bringing some benefit to us at Cardiff, I think, at the moment.
I think that's probably true more widely. I think for all we could get into a discussion about the ref as a good or a bad thing, but the fact that the word culture now appears. I enjoy the fact that there's many people now who are experts on culture who never mentioned culture for 20 or 30 years before the word culture appeared in the ref. But the good thing is that it is pushing that discussion, and it is making if nothing else, it is pushing decisions to happen. And I think Train the Trainer fits in very nicely around that, because it is making people think about what are we doing, why are we doing it. Maybe to come back to an earlier point, I think that's where those things all join up to me. There's an interesting point about openness in research, but also openness in what universities are doing and to who. And I think you can look into the science or the other research and say, how open is that? You can also look into what universities are doing and say, how open is this? And I think it's quite interesting, because I think there's an opportunity to make both of those equally accountable in the way that open research can be accountable. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think the question remains to be seen whether like the next ref, or sorry, the one after will, if we see a big emphasis on open research, that could be an absolute game changer. I think we're all kind of banking on that. But yeah, I guess it can be very impactful, obviously, but there's also this mystery period where we're all sort of working in the dark a bit. But then, things like Training the Trainer have shifted the agenda. Yeah, and UKRN, generally.
I'm wondering, Liz, if you have any thoughts, especially with the qualitative sort of side of things, which can pose quite challenges, if you've had any reflections on the talk of culture in the ref.
Not specifically about the ref, no. I guess coming back to the earlier point about the future of the T3 courses, I kind of saw it from a different way, in that surely the point of the T3 courses would be that they would become extinct eventually, that they wouldn't be needed. I think that fits a bit more with Bristol's agenda. It's got people focused on research culture in quite a lot of places, and one of the problems I think we found with the T3 courses, well, not necessarily a problem, but we were just aware that there was a bit of duplication in terms of who was running stuff, and that we weren't aware of each other, because it's just quite a big university. I think we're sorting that out a bit now. But that was that was one of the challenges we came across. Sorry, back to the ref point now.
No, that's great. I would say that I think that's like a perennial problem is, as speaking as like professional staff, we're often like, we don't know about, if someone's doing an internal department sort of training on this, because obviously, like, as Kirsty was saying, we know sort of the best practices for publishing data or that kind of stuff. So we're often like, oh, are you doing that? That's great. Like, can we just make sure that, that there are resources here that we can help you with and that kind of stuff. So that sort of siloing, I think, is a perennial problem, and definitely. And I think part of the Train the Trainer program was to try and sort of provide a platform for folks to have the resources to do this, right? To pool the resources, but ideally, I think also in that same action of trying to centralize and provide that pool of resources for folks to train off of, it will ideally suck in sort of people from these different silos. Hopefully. But we'll see. Great. Well, thank you guys so much. We have a little bit of time left, so I thought maybe we could ask the audience if they had any questions. You're welcome to put them into the chat. Or Kate, do they have permission to unmic? Can they unmic and ask a question if they'd like?
I believe so. So please do feel free to put your hand up and or put it in the chat, whichever you prefer. Just whilst we're waiting for questions to come through, I'd just like to throw it back to Lucy's follow-up point in the chat. So thank you very much, Lucy, for putting that down. So Lucy's original question, the panel answered in terms of do you think research support staff should deliver OR training, or is it more effective from academic fellow researchers? And we covered that. And then Lucy mentioned that they're focused, and Lucy, correct me if I get this wrong, but you're thinking more about how academics later on in careers who are not currently participating as much in OR training, and whether the peer-to-peer still might be effective in terms of trying to change behaviour. Just to start. Oh, sorry, Kirsty.
It was just to say that I think that if anyone manages to find a solution to this problem, please do let your professional services staff know, because this is a perennial problem, right? And quite often we find that we're just waiting for those people to retire, especially if they're in a position. This all goes back to the stuff that the Open Research Programme, the UK Reproducibility Network, and everyone's doing about recognition, reward, research culture, research integrity. We need to try and change what happens at the top. And that could be at the top of a project, or at the top of a department, or at the top of a school. And some work that was done, it's actually available on their repository, some work that was done by Edinburgh University. They did a research culture survey, and they followed it up 2 years later. They did it first of all in lockdown. And it's effectively, it says that you can come in with the best ideas in the world and be the newest, brightest, shining star, but 80% of culture is what's already there. And eventually you'll have to kind of crumble you'll have to bow down to the pressures that are above you. So I think that it's a really interesting point, and it is a very, very difficult nut to crack, because if you can't change that mindset from get the next bid, get the next grant, get the next publication, back to we should be doing this because we should be doing good research, and this is the best way of improving our research integrity, it's going to be quite difficult to get any real traction on it.
I don't have a solution to that, but I think there's two things about it that always strike me as interesting. Is that I always think behaviour change is always really difficult. I always think it's really weird that we do struggle with the senior top people in some ways, because like your job as an academic is to read stuff, and for all like train the trainer and everything does these things, like, but own research is not a new thing, right? It's been around since like I was a PhD student. It's like ages ago. And it is weird that people like what is going on. Like there's other systematic interests and issues there about what are the barriers, or is it just because people haven't heard about it? But I think more optimistically, I also think that's where senior university people need to start listening more to the people who are coming up behind them, and not worry about that. Like some of the best ways I've always found of convincing universities is to just say every other university is doing it, which is ludicrous, right? Because you're supposed to be leaders. You know, it's like you sometimes sit in departments that are saying we're a leader of X thing, right? Well, lead then. So I think I think sometimes, from what I said to begin with, it's risk aversion of like. Although I think in this case, I don't see what the risks are for making stuff more transparent and open, because then more people read it. But you know, but I think that's part of the barrier. It's risk, and I think that's even. I think I've seen work before where, you know, when people are sharing code and stuff, they worry that people are going to find mistakes in it. Right, well, yeah, but it's better to know the mistake. I mean, ideally you find it yourself, right? But that's the whole point. If it's to be closed away, then go and work for a third company. You know, it's not a public thing. So, yeah, I think I don't have a solution. That's just me ranting about that.
On that, so I completely agree that it's mostly the earlier career researchers who are coming to the courses and are keen to try some of this. But one of the things that they're telling me in the courses is that they just, even if their supervisor or line manager, the more senior person says yes, go ahead and do that, that's fine, but they won't give them any time for it. It's not costed into bids to make a data set available. or to pre-register anything. So it has to be an optional extra, and then it's down to the early career researcher to get it done, and then they'll have to do that in their own time or just work super quick because their contract will be running out. So I guess funders could take a bigger role by making it mandatory to have that in a grant application and questioning why it isn't in, say, a Gantt chart.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like getting funders on board with, first of all, being interested in the outputs of the research in a serious way and the quality of the research. To give a positive example, with the sort of research culture shift in the last, and the emphasis on research culture with funding for so yeah, I was probably fairly skeptical about that, and I thought it was just some of it was not much substance, but then my partner's boss has now written a grant. She's research professional services, technical services staff. And now, because of this research culture drive, he's written to the grant that he will make way for a PhD by publication for her, which is a conversation she wanted to have for ages, but now it's come up because of this. So I think the role of funders is sort of fundamental here. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much. We have just a few minutes left if someone has another quick question, or if any of our panelists want to have a quick last word.
Can I just shout out to Kirsty, who told me about the Ghost Collective's Open Science Sense Humanity. I didn't use it for my first few courses. I use it in every course now. It's hilarious, and it really gets people talking about the issues. So if you want to go and take a look at the Ghost Collective's take on what's it called? It's not. I've just got Open Science Against Humanity. Whatever the real version is, it's a take on that.
Do you mean the one that we published? So it's actually the Bristol one.
Yeah, it's on GitHub as the Ghost Collective. That's who I credit with it. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. So it's on our research data repository as it's Cards Against Humanity on our research data repository. It's called Researchers' Impact and Publications.
Oh, that's not the one I'm using.
No, it might not be.
I'm going to go find another one.
2 or 3 other people done that. But the other thing that I would always suggest that people use, and I probably said this in the course, is go to Glasgow and get their metadata Lego game, because it is cracking. I wish I'd come up with it myself. If you want to teach people how to make sure that their stuff is reproducible, do the Lego game.
Great. Unofficially sponsor of Open Research.
Yeah, unofficial sponsor. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we're at time. So I just wanted to thank our panelists very much for their time today and for the great discussion. Also, Kirsty for her lovely introduction. And Kate for all the admin assistance. Thank you. And also thank you all to the audience. Hope you enjoyed it. And hopefully we'll see you for some more Open Research Week. There's a cracking schedule. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good day.
Cheers. Thanks.